Right, and welcome back. So, Breakfast Central this Tuesday morning with Olisa and Felicity.
Yes, indeed. It's
Yep,
been good so far.
so far, so good. Especially as we're marking 1 year since lockdown in South Africa, one of the worst hit countries when it comes to COVID-19.
Yes, indeed. Let's take a background. On March 5, 2020, the South African National Institute for Communicable Diseases confirmed the first case of COVID-19 in that country. On March 15, same year, the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, declared a national state of disaster and announced measures such as immediate travel restrictions and closures.
Well, this week, South Africa marks 1 year of lockdown, and the country has had one of the longest lockdowns globally, varying in intensity based on the stages publicized by the government. Now, the country is currently on level 1 of lockdown, meaning that most economic and social activity is allowed with some limitations in the country.
So far, the country has recorded 1.5 million cases with 1.46 million recoveries and 52,111 deaths, making it the highest in Africa and the 16th highest number of confirmed infections worldwide. Now, joining us is Dianne Hawker, South African journalist and editor. Welcome to The Breakfast. Let's get on to it. This coming Friday, good morning, your country will officially have been in lockdown for a full year. Citizens had a few days to prepare for this. What were the most significant things you can recall about the initial announcement?
Well, I think, one of the things that strikes me now a year later is that at the initial announcement, everybody was preparing for 21 days of lockdown. And that 21 days has now extended to a full year. There was a lot of panic buying at the outset, a lot of concerns about when people would be able to see their family members, because the first lockdown was quite a strict lockdown. You were not allowed to travel to other provinces. You were, in fact, not allowed to travel much further beyond your own neighborhood. You could go to other parts of the city if you were going for work or if there was a compelling reason, but you had to have a permit to do that kind of travel because there were a number of roadblocks that were set out. Looking at where we stand now, we've kind of become accustomed to a different kind of life, a new normal. We've become accustomed to having some sort of lockdown, even though not as extreme as what we first experienced. Masks are just part of the normal, outfit that you wear for every day. Sanitizing at entrances to shops and malls, that's also become extremely normal now, as well as the fact that at some point the president might announce a change in our lockdown schedule, and that's also become part of what we've become accustomed to.
Right, Dianne. I remember, at some point, even we saw military personnel on the streets of some parts in South Africa to enforce lockdown sometime last year when the pandemic sprang up. But in what ways has lockdown most impacted life in South Africa in general?
I think, yes, you're right. The military being on the streets of South Africa, that was an extremely unusual thing. Where there were certain instances that, you would have military, but it was usually when there's something major happening, when there was, some kind of threat. So if there was a very high spike in crime, you might see that there would be a request for military assistance. Around election time to help with monitoring, there's also often a request for the military. But government doesn't often deploy military. So we knew that when the military was on the street that this was going to be quite an unusual, period going forward. Other ways that our lives have been affected have really been that the public space has become much more closed down. You don't see big public events or festivals like you used to see before. This year is an election year, and one of the biggest changes that we're seeing is that there's no major campaigning taking place ahead of the local government elections, which are meant to take place later this year. Even our State of the Nation address that was earlier on in February was a completely different event. It's usually characterized by pomp and ceremony, parades in the streets of Cape Town. And it was so subdued. It was actually quite strange to watch because you had a hybrid parliamentary sitting where some MPs were in the House, but others were in their own homes. So we've just become accustomed to a really different type of life, as well as obviously those numbers coming out from government every day to say where we stand with the COVID-19.
Yeah, I was as we were talking, I was thinking about in some parts of the world there's been some protest against lockdown measures. Have you seen a scenario like that in South Africa? Are the people, antsy, so to speak, with the lockdown and the impact it's having on their lives?
Well, I would say South Africans haven't really protested over lockdown as a whole, but they have protested over some aspects of it. So one of the things that did cause a big concern were some of the restrictions on travel. And we didn't see protests in the street, but we did see a lot of civil society groups complaining about that, to say that people should be allowed at some point to reunite with their families. I know that there was also a court case that was brought because some parents were concerned that their children were with one parent who may have had custody at the time. But because of the strict restrictions of level 5, those parents were not allowed to then take their children to the other parent because the other parent might have been in another city or in another province. And we found that the court has had to make rulings on a regular basis on some of these issues. The tobacco restrictions were also a big concern, and we did see, threats to protest over that, along with the liquor restrictions. But the thing about our lockdown and how government has done it is that there have been different levels. So like you mentioned earlier, we are in level 1 now. And life pretty much continues as normal. People are going to work. You can go to the shops at any time. The only difference is that there's a curfew. So you have to be at home by midnight, and that curfew ends at 4 a.m. But what has been happening is as the numbers begin to increase, then the government relooks that and they go to level 5 or level 1 or level 3. And that has more and more restrictions. Since that initial lockdown, we've mainly stayed between level 3 and 1, and we haven't been needed to go to level 5, which is the strictest part of it again.
All right, Dianne. I also need to ask you, because one of the features we saw about South African lockdown, despite the regular briefings of Ramaphosa about level 1 and level 3, there was this talk about, bans of alcohol and sales of cigarettes, which clearly made the headlines about the rate of spike of alcohol and the rate of infections going hand in hand. How have, South Africans been able to move away from that since?
Well, I think in December, that was a big concern, obviously, because, over the summer season, there's generally tends to be a lot more festive activity, people partying and hosting brides. And that's why we were put into another more stricter lockdown over the December period. As a result of that variant that was discovered here in South Africa, our caseloads were going up much, much more. And we did see that, the casualty rooms of hospitals were not able to cope with the high numbers of people coming in with COVID-19, as well as other normal things such as car accidents or, people being in motor vehicle accidents or other kind of things. What we do see now is that there is a concern that during the Easter period that there might be a need to have some additional restrictions in place, because the Easter period does generally see a lot more travel, people socializing with family members for Easter. There are some very large church gatherings that take place, such as in Moria, in Limpopo, where people from all over the SADC region actually travel to Moria for Easter. And that has been a concern, more than necessarily liquor consumption, that the Easter travel and religious gatherings could actually result in us entering a third wave. And there's a lot of speculation that there might be an additional address just before Easter from the president, where they'll be given some clarity as to what is meant to happen with those religious gatherings, particularly when it comes to the capacity that the churches are allowed to have.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about, efforts to contain the pandemic. On Monday, that's February 1, South Africa received the first batch of 1 million AstraZeneca vaccine doses. Now, it is expected to be used to inoculate frontline healthcare workers starting mid-February. But we also know that the AstraZeneca vaccine was said to be ineffective in handling the new variant in your country. What is the state of things now in terms of vaccination? We also understand that vaccine is being sold. Can you clarify that?
Yes, that's it. That's correct. The AstraZeneca vaccine has been sold off to other countries that are in the African Union who don't have the prevalence of the second variant that was discovered here in South Africa in December. I think that second variant caused a lot of headache, in fact, for our government because they had purchased this AstraZeneca vaccine and the idea was to roll it out within a few weeks. And when that second variant was identified, the brakes had to be put on that. So what we've seen now is more of a focus on Johnson and Johnson, and that has been given to mainly healthcare workers. There isn't word at this stage as to when ordinary South Africans, such as myself, are also going to be inoculated. We've seen several thousand healthcare workers getting that J&J vaccine, which I think has been encouraging. But I think there's also a concern that government has been a bit quiet about the next part, as in when are the people with comorbidities, the elderly, other frontline workers such as police and firefighters and even journalists, when they will be kind of put on that list for inoculation. So we're also hoping that if the president does do an address in the next coming days, that's one of the things that will be addressed.
All right, Dianne Hawker, thank you very much for joining us, South African journalist and editor. We know that the Easter period is coming in. Let's hope that the Amapiano doesn't cause any increase or any spikes, but no pun intended at the South African taste of music anyway. Thank you very much,
Dianne, for joining us on The Breakfast.
All right, then. We'll be going straight for a break right here on Breakfast Central. We still got more on the business front. Lots to talk about economically, and we'll have Tunji Andrews.
Yeah, but before we go on that break, I just want to quickly commend the South African president in particular for his consistency in addressing the people, talking to the people. He doesn't delegate anyone to do it. You see him address the people from time to time. I sense that's maybe one of the reasons you've not had protests over, because there is communication, it seems, at every point. So whether it's complete or not, whether it is not
one level 3.
Yes, whatever it is, he deserves some commendation for that, I guess. That's it. We'll go on a break.
Are you trying to make a comparison on like another president?
Of course you know.
I'll take you up on that. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.